declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. Inevitably, a long life can pass by many milestones. My own is no exception.
You're watching ABC News Live's special coverage as ceremonies get underway in the formal farewell to the UK's Queen Elizabeth. I'm Diane Macedo, live in London. A service celebrating the Queen's life is now underway at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, Scotland. After that ceremony, the Queen will lie in state at the cathedral for 24 hours, where members of the public will be able to view the coffin and pay their respects. King Charles and his siblings, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward, all accompanied the coffin on foot in a procession through the streets of Edinburgh, with other members of the royal family following behind in cars. It's all part of a 10-day period of mourning ahead of the Queen's funeral at Westminster Hall and Westminster Abbey, set for September 19th. Amy Robach is in Edinburgh, Scotland, with more.
Newly declared King Charles and his siblings escorting Queen Elizabeth's procession from Holyrood House to St. Giles Cathedral. Earlier in the day, King Charles met with both houses of Parliament at Westminster.
I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us.
The Queen's coffin leaving her beloved Balmoral retreat, taking a 175-mile journey through Scotland. Mourners packing city streets and rural roads to say farewell. In Aberdeenshire, farmers lined the route with an honour guard of tractors.
It was a great turnout. There must have been 40+ tractors there, either side of the main roads.
As the hearse arrived at Holyrood House, it was met by members of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Princess Anne, who rode behind the Queen's coffin for 6 hours, showing respect for her mother with a curtsy. On Saturday, this rare moment of unity, Prince William and Princess Kate seen in an unexpected reunion with Harry and Meghan.
Thank you, everyone.
The couples together again publicly for the first time in more than 2 years.
It was Prince William that put out the olive branch to Harry, and I think it was a good first move. Does it mean this is over, this rift between them, this tension? We'll have to wait and see.
Our thanks to Amy Robach for that report, and I want to bring in ABC News royal contributor Omid Scobie for more on this, and ABC News Inez de la Quatara for more as well. Omi, this ceremony is underway right now. What can we expect during the rest of the service at St. Giles Cathedral?
Of course, the service itself is focused very much on the life of the Queen. There are hymns, there are readings shared, but also here for the minister as well, and the dean of the cathedral, just sharing a few words as well, paying respect to the children of the Queen as well, of course, and the family that have lost their grandmother, their mother, their great-grandmother on this very sad moment. Of course, the Queen, as we've said, will lie there at state, resting at state for the next 24 hours. It will be a chance for members of the public to go there and pay their respects. For Charles and Camilla, it moves on very quickly. They'll receive the First Minister of Scotland, and then they'll also receive condolences from Scottish Parliament in about an hour or so. So it's a busy day of events for them. Of course, they started the day receiving those condolences from both parliaments here in London before they moved on to Scotland. So it was during that we heard from Charles. He spoke about that burden that he takes on, of course, this sort of huge role that the Queen leaves behind, and him doing his utmost to continue to uphold the values and the level of duty that she established, of course, as monarch. It's a big role to fill, but so far so good. I mean, I think we've seen the support from people across the country, that they are here to support King Charles III. They're here to accept Camilla, the Queen Consort. And I think for the palace, that was a moment that many would have worried about in recent years. So to see that go so smoothly up until this point and people show the utmost respect, I think it's a great start.
And Inez, the ceremony taking place right now at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, Scotland, was in part planned by the Queen herself, with so many personal touches in tribute to her affinity for Scotland.
Hey, Diane. Yeah, I mean, I think it is an emotional day in Scotland. We did see the Queen's coffin being carried from the Palace of Holyrood House over to St. Giles Cathedral. We saw the Queen's children walking behind the coffin and thousands of people lining the street. There is a service now ongoing, and the people of Scotland will eventually be able to go and see the Queen at St. Giles. They will be given one last chance to say goodbye to their Queen as she lies in rest for 24 hours. But an emotional time in Scotland. The Queen was very connected to Scotland. She had Scottish family. She loved going there. She loved going to her Balmoral estate, which is the royal estate in Scotland. She would spend her summers there. Like you say, she was involved in the planning of these ceremonies. So the Queen clearly loved Scotland. And I think if you look at the outpouring of support, you know, the thousands of people who came out to see that procession today, I think it's safe to say that the people of Scotland also love their Queen.
And Omid, this is not just a ceremony for someone as head of state, but also head of the armed services. And we saw 3 of the Queen's children in their military uniform. Prince Andrew's no longer a working royal, so he was not in uniform, but he did have his military medals. Why is that such an important part of the ceremony?
Of course, as the head of the armed forces, it played a huge role in the Queen's reign, and we've seen that reflected, of course, in the duties and the roles carried out by her children as well, including Prince Andrew, who, of course, did serve many years ago. So although we don't see him in his uniform today, no longer being a working royal, as you say, that honour is still there in the medals that he wears. There has been, of course, talk about who will and won't be in uniform over the days ahead, and we had that confirmation from Buckingham Palace sources this morning that Prince Harry will not be allowed to wear his uniform over the days ahead. Prince Andrew has been given one exception. There's a final vigil that takes place at Westminster Hall in London, and he will, as a show of respect to his mother, be able to wear his military uniform for that moment. So I think it shows the sort of level of thought that goes into these things. We know the Queen had a big say in many of the elements that we're seeing play out over the days ahead. But of course, this is something that's particularly key in those moments.
And Inez, the day for King Charles didn't start there in Edinburgh, Scotland. It actually started right there in the Houses of Parliament, where he addressed the Houses of Parliament, and not only that, you know, they have already taken an oath to him, but he was stressing the nature of the relationship, being that he is also committed to Parliament and together to protecting the British Constitution. Why is that relationship so important, and how big is it for King Charles right now to be straddling these 2 roles? One, as a son mourning his mother and as a part of the royal family mourning the monarch, but also as the new king himself taking on those duties?
Yeah, I mean, a big moment. So before heading up to Scotland, the King did head over to Westminster to speak before both Houses of Parliament that had gathered to pay their respects, express their condolences for his loss. We heard the King making remarks. He talked about feeling the weight of history, but it was a symbolic, powerful moment because it kind of went to show, you know, to highlight just how intertwined those 2 institutions are, the monarchy and Parliament. Remember, the Queen used to meet weekly with the Prime Minister. She lived through 15 Prime Ministers up until, you know, the very end. The last time we saw the Queen appearing in public was when she met with the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. And I think if you look at what Charles said today, speaking before both chambers of Parliament, I think we can expect that he'll be taking on a similar role, and he'll have a close relationship with lawmakers as well.
Yep, she met with every single one of those prime ministers in person, including the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Omid, Inez, thank you both. Coming up, we'll have more of the day's top stories from New York with Phil Lipoff, including dozens of wildfires burning in Northern California. Stay with us.
Welcome back. I'm Phil Lipoff in New York. We will get back to London and Diane Macedo in just a few minutes, but first, we'll look at some of the other stories we are following for you right now. Remnants of Tropical Storm Kay brought heavy rain to Southern California over the weekend, causing flooding and mudslides. Take a look at the video. More than 20 vehicles were reported trapped in mud and debris on scenic Lake Hughes Road, which is north of Los Angeles. Meantime, dozens of wildfires are burning from Northern California into Washington State and the Northern Rockies. Smoke from those fires causing air quality alerts in 4 states. Former President Trump's legal team has responded to the Department of Justice's request for a stay of a federal judge's decision temporarily blocking investigators from accessing classified documents seized by the FBI. Trump's team saying the special master is a sensible preliminary step that should not be skipped. Prosecutors want those top secret records to be kept away from the so-called special master the judge plans to appoint to review all of the documents. The Justice Department claims the judge's ruling is hindering its investigation. 19-year-old Spanish tennis phenom Carlos Alvarez won the men's singles championship at the U.S. Open overnight, becoming the youngest U.S. Open winner in 30 years, and the youngest man ever to become the world's #1 ranked tennis player. Alvarez fell to the court after beating Norway's Casper Ruud in 4 sets, then climbed into the stands for an emotional celebration with his team. Alvarez later called the moment something he has dreamed of since he was a kid, a few short years ago. Now to what could be a major turning point in the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces have taken back significant territory from retreating Russian forces in Ukraine's east. Just over the last couple of days, Russia now retaliating with new attacks on critical infrastructure and power grids. Tom Sufi-Burridge on the scene for us in Ukraine.
Ukrainian forces marking massive victories in the northeast. Their troops now controlling the strategic military hub of Izium, which was occupied by Russian forces for months. Now, videos circulating online show abandoned Russian tanks and military equipment littering the area. Ukrainian soldiers raising their flag once again over the city. It's a massive blow for Putin. And across a large swathe of territory, troops liberating dozens of towns and villages in video released by the Ukrainian military. Emotional scenes, civilians greeting and embracing Ukrainian troops. In this map here, you can see the amount of ground Ukrainian forces have retaken in blue, near the city of Kharkiv. Officials say they have reclaimed more than 1,000 square miles. President Zelensky praising his soldiers, saying everyone sees and notes your actions in the north, south and east of Ukraine. The world is impressed. The enemy is panicking. Ukraine is proud. The Russian military retaliating, with Russian missiles striking power stations and other civilian infrastructure throughout Ukraine. Backing Ukraine's military and key to its success, a vast army of volunteers, here making them clothing and kit. Mechanics turning civilian cars into military vehicles. And these volunteers making plastic artillery pieces. From a distance, they're realistic replicas, decoys to dupe the Russians.
Phil, this morning, the Ukrainian military claiming new victories in other parts of the country. And there's also been an incredible admission from the Kremlin that it has lost control of almost all of Ukraine's northeasterly Kharkiv region. This is a real tide-turning moment in this war, and US intel and weapons have been key. Phil?
Tom Sufi-Burridge for us in Ukraine. Thank you. And earlier today on GMA, George Stephanopoulos spoke with former federal prosecutor Jeffrey Berman, who was fired by former President Trump after refusing to resign. Now he's out with a new book called Holding the Line. Here's a portion of that interview.
You refused to indict him, but Greg Craig was indicted. They went to the Washington District U.S. Attorney's Office. Eventually, he came to trial and was acquitted, I think, within 5 hours.
Yes.
Vindication?
It was vindication, but the case should never have been brought. I was on the phone with the U.S. Attorney from the District of Columbia trying to convince her not to indict Greg Craig. The case was too weak to be brought. It was inappropriate to be brought, and that's what the trial showed.
You also talk about an effort to get you to prosecute the former Secretary of State, John Kerry.
Yeah, that was truly outrageous. President Trump attacks John Kerry in 2 tweets saying that Kerry engaged in possible illegal conversations with Iranian officials regarding the Iran nuclear deal. The very next day, the Trump Justice Department refers the John Kerry criminal case to the Southern District of New York. 2 tweets by the president, and the John Kerry criminal case becomes a priority for the Department of Justice. And the statute they wanted us to use was enacted in 1799 and had never been successfully prosecuted. So in about 220 years this criminal statute was on the books, there were no convictions.
Your office also prosecuted Michael Cohen, who is, of course, President Trump's former lawyer. How did the president's allies get involved in that case?
A couple different ways. In the first instance, on the eve of Cohen's guilty plea, Maine Justice tried to get our office to remove any reference to individual one, who was President Trump. And they were unsuccessful in that venture. And they were unsuccessful in every attempt to politically interfere with our office. We held the line in every instance.
You know, I've never understood, if President Trump is indeed individual one in that case, which we know that he is, if he was directing Michael Cohen to violate the law, how come he wasn't prosecuted?
Well, the decision to prosecute is a very complex one, and it depends. Evidence against one individual doesn't necessarily apply as equally against another person. And so, you know, it's a complex situation, and no charges were ever brought against anyone but Michael Cohen in that case.
Our thanks to George for that interview. Coming up, as King Charles III takes on his new responsibilities, we are learning a little bit more about his work ethic and his role as a father. We'll be right back. Diane Macedo, live from London. Stay with us.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. I'm Diane Macedo in London. And in the wake of Queen Elizabeth's passing, ABC News' Deborah Roberts sat down with someone very close to King Charles, talking about everything from his work ethic to his relationship with the Queen Consort Camilla, as well as his role as a father. Here's ABC News Senior National Affairs Correspondent Deborah Roberts with more.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion.
When the new King Charles gave that first speech after his mother's death, one man was following each and every word.
I can see it in his face and hear it in his voice, you know, the pain and the grief.
How did he do in that speech?
I, too, now solemnly pledge myself.
It was from the heart, and it was his. Those were his words, the intonation, the language, the tone, the quoting of Shakespeare at the end. It was all the king. It was a perfect combination of the personal and the constitutional.
Patty Harvison once helped the former prince write those speeches. As a communications director to the royal family, he helped shape Charles's image. Do you truly feel he's ready now for this moment?
Yeah, 100%. He's clearly the best prepared monarch we've ever had. He's the hardest working person I've ever known. I mean that. He never stops. There isn't a day in the year he isn't working.
If the Queen's mantra was all about duty and diligence and responsibility, here in 2022, what is this king's mantra, do you think?
His job is to follow the example set by his mother and do the job to the best of his abilities. I've never met anyone who has a deeper understanding of self. You know, he is a very, very thoughtful person, and he has deeply held views. He will do it his way.
Harvison joined the then Prince of Wales back in 2004 as a top PR force during a tough time. Princess Diana had died 7 years earlier, and Charles was struggling to shake off negative press while making a new life with his old love, Camilla Parker Bowles, who was less than popular. Will people accept Camilla as queen and be able to separate her from their thoughts about her as the other woman who came and ruined this fairy tale marriage?
Yes, absolutely. They've been married for 17 years now, and she has been by his side, working diligently, supporting him, but also pursuing her own causes, some quite challenging ones. I know there is no issue around there. She will be a popular queen. What is it that Camilla brings to him, and what is it that she's going to be able to do to help him in these duties as king? Well, you know, they love each other. She is a source of great support and comfort and love. They share the same sense of humor. They just blend together beautifully. In his new role, King Charles is already seemingly focused on restoring peace between his two sons, William and Harry. After a very public rift drove them apart, Saturday, the brothers surprised many, joining forces with their spouses to greet mourners outside Windsor Castle. How is he going to handle this discord, do you think? He's a father with two sons, and I think he'll do it full of love and patience. I think this week will probably be the start of a healing period. I would hope so. He will do whatever he can as a father to bring his sons together.
Our thanks to Deborah Roberts for that report. Meanwhile, the Queen's death has also reignited conversations about the monarchy's legacy of colonialism, making grief for some very complicated. The head of consultancies at the Sir Lenny Henry Center for Media Diversity, Marcus Ryder, joins me live now for more on this. Marcus, thank you for being here. We've seen so many tributes pouring in for the Queen, gifts left outside all of the various palaces and castles. But for some in this country, this is a more complicated moment than that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, it's definitely more complicated. Looking at the different nations, looking at England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, looking at the different ethnic minorities who've got links to the colonies as well, or the former colonies, I should say. You know, we are a heterogeneous people. Britain, that's one of the things that makes Britain great. And so while it's important that we mourn the death of a head of state, we need to make sure that we understand that we're a heterogeneous country. Our population is diverse. And there are some really complicated feelings and emotions and political views as well, which are happening right now. And some of that is not being reflected in the coverage and how we are responding as the large national institutions are responding to this moment.
It's a difficult time to have that conversation, but of course an important one as well. So how do you want to see that coverage, and how do you have that conversation in a way that recognizes the moment, but also recognizes that, as you say, not everybody feels the same way about this moment?
I don't think, we've all been to funerals, and we all know, even just family funerals, we know that even when we are mourning, we have complicated relationships. That doesn't mean that we don't go to the funeral. That doesn't mean that we don't mourn in our own way. But sometimes you'll have a feeling towards auntie this or uncle that, which is not just a two-dimensional response. And that doesn't mean that you are any less respectful. And it's important to understand that the Queen's reign for 70 years, she came in at a very controversial time. She was in Kenya just as the British state was crushing the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya for independence, which is now seen as possibly crimes against humanity. You know, and so if you talk to Kenyans who are living here, if you talk to other countries of their nationals who are living here, it's a complicated relationship, and that needs to be reflected.
And it's a conversation, no doubt, that will continue to move forward in the days and months ahead. Marcus, we thank you so much for helping us be a part of that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you at home for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo, again live from London, and do stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.